I'm back with another Friday Reads. So since I did my last Friday, or rather Sunday Reads, I've read two books, one of them being The Queen's Choice by, let me get this name right, Eggleston Wilfred. And no, I got that backwards. The author's name is Wilfred Eggleston, not Eggleston Wilfred. This is a book that was published in 1961, and I had picked up a hardcover copy at a used bookshop. When I was home over Christmas, I left it behind because I couldn't fit it in my luggage, and so when I went home to visit my parents, I read that book. The author is basically talking about the history of Ottawa, because there was a lot of debate about where the capital of Canada should be. The top choice for many was Montreal. Some people said York, now called Toronto. But the Queen, at the time, decided on Ottawa. Now, Ottawa was not a very big city. It was a logging town. It wasn't posh. There's actually a story in that book when the Governor General arrived to take up residence at Rideau House. He arrived and he took one look at the property and wanted to go back because it wasn't fancy enough for him. It just wasn't what people thought a capital city should be. And so over the decades there was urban planning, architectural contests, that sort of thing, to first of all build the Parliament buildings, which went over budget but were obviously finished. And then to kind of lay out the downtown. It wasn't until after World War II that what we see as the downtown today actually took shape. There's buildings talked about in this book that are no longer there. And in respect to the old train station downtown, the old train station that is still there and that is about to serve as the home of the Senate for the next 10 years, while Centre Block undergoes restoration. In 1961, the author was talking about the upcoming demolition of that building, but obviously it's still there. It was just a very interesting book in the fact that I obviously know Ottawa now. I know a lot of the locations the author was talking about, and of course it was written in the 60s, so I get that interesting perspective as well. In addition to The Queen's Choice, I also read a biography of Clark Gable by Renee Jordan. I'm not remembering the publication date on this book. This is a book that I read also when I was back at my parents', and I ended up passing it on to the charity shop after I read it. It was something that I think had been a Christmas gift or someone had picked up for me, and I was semi-interested in it, and it sat on my shelf for a long time, and then I finally got to it when I wanted a light read. I am definitely a Clark Gable fan. I first saw him in Gone with the Wind, of course. One of my other favorites is It Happened One Night. I watched a lot of his films when I was a teenager. This was more of a filmography, if that makes sense. It was talking about a little bit about his life, but the author was mainly concerned with the films he made, the circumstances around those, and the impact that those films had on his career. It was a fairly short book, less than 200 pages. An interesting read, though. And then, of course, I read Richard III for the Shake Tube Readathon, and I filmed a video about that earlier today and posted it. And now, of course, in this upcoming week I'm going to be reading Romeo and Juliet, but as well, I just knocked my camera. I'm going to read something that I picked up at the library today. It's a 2-volume set, so this is The Upper Canadian Rebellion by John Charles Dent. The story of the Upper Canadian Rebellion, rather. And it was actually the books themselves that caught my eye on the shelf of the library today. Gold, leather, definitely quite old. I'm just going to check the publication date. Oh, look at this. Little bit of damage to them, but they're just beautiful books. Yeah, so we're looking at 1885 as the publication dates of these. Here we go. Entered according to the Act of the Parliament of Canada in the year 1885 by C. Blackett Robinson in the office of the Minister of Agriculture. I dedicate this book to my esteemed friend George Stewart Jr. of Quebec, whose researches in a kindred direction will enable him to do full justice to whatever is meritorious in it, while his generous appreciation of the efforts of his literary brethren will render him indulgent to its defects. John Charles Dent, Toronto, 1885. Yeah, so this appears to be a 2-volume set. There were only the 2 volumes on the shelf of the library. Anyway, the story of the Upper Canadian Rebellion, Chapter 1, The Banished Briton. So this appears to be history told in a somewhat literary format. It's just beautiful books. The first chapter is called The Banished Briton. And it's followed up by A Bill of Particulars and The Family Compact. We take a look at volume 2. There's some paint or something on the cover, which is unfortunate. Published by C. Blackett Robinson, 1885, Toronto. Some great illustrations in these. Oh, author of The Last 40 Years. I've never heard of that book. Largely derived from original sources and documents. Yep, just 2 volumes. This confirms it. Volume 1 and Volume 2. I intend to dig into these tonight. In fact, I might even finish Volume 1 before bed, because it's... oh, I didn't notice that the pages are gold as well. I mean, it's history, but it seems to be laid out in a very accessible format, and it's not all that long, and I don't have anything left to do today, and it's only 3 p.m., so why not? I'm kind of killing a few days here. I'm in kind of a holding zone, I'll call it, while I wait to start my new job. Old job is done, vacation is done. I'm just kind of waiting on Tuesday